Welcome to Single Beater Bingo, the fun game you can play at home anytime you see a post or video about whole beat metronome practice. If you don't know what that is, you can get the full story in this clickbait video. But here's the quick version. Composers from Beethoven to now have used metronome markings to tell performers how fast to play their works. But there's a problem particular to music from the 19th century that if performers stick to the modern interpretation of those metronome marks, their music is often impossible to play. Either physically impossible, that is, performers just cannot think and move their fingers that fast, or musically impossible. That is, maybe performers can more or less get the notes out, but not without distorting rhythms and ignoring nuance like phrasing, dynamics, and articulation. We call that impossible speed a single beat metronome practice. But it's been suggested that composers from that time used the metronome differently than we do today. They counted each tick of the metronome as a little beat or microbeat, and it's the full swing of the metronome there and back that equals a big beat or macrobeat. When metronome marks are interpreted that way, it results in a tempo that's exactly half as fast as the single beat version, conveniently and elegantly solving the impossible to play problem, resulting in music that's actually musical rather than frantic. We call this practical and musical solution a whole beat metronome practice. However, Team Single Beat thinks this idea came straight from the devil, and they get very, very mad about it. Every time there's an online discussion about whole beat metronome practice, the deniers show up with the same 24 talking points every time. And it can be a little frustrating to be one person talking about something as arcane as 19th century Western European tempo markings, to be overwhelmed by the same 15 people saying the same things over and over in every different comment thread, and then sticking their fingers in their ears and going la 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 when there's a rebuttal. So I thought I'd make a game of it. Single Beater Bingo is my way to let all of the whole beat deniers of the world know you have been heard. We have heard all of your arguments, and they are not made more compelling by the fact that you have several. We're going to go over all 24 arguments the deniers use, and I'll give my take on each one. If I'm lucky and this video gets any traction, then I'm going to have a ton of fun playing bingo based on what shows up in the comment section. If I win, I'll post about it and take myself out to dinner. I'll also put a link in the description so you can download your very own copy of Single Beater Bingo. That way you can have fun playing whenever anyone posts about whole beat. It's a lot more fun than just sitting there and taking the unhinged hatred that tends to come our way from a handful of haters who'd rather talk than engage with the music. This is actually a good discussion to have. From very early in music lessons, teachers try to teach students to take a piece that they can play comfortably and make it faster, gradually over weeks and months by using the metronome, flogging your fingers like tightening a corset, all the way to conservatory, where students spend an inordinate amount of time, years, not playing musically, but trying to get everything faster. Metronome marks drive this practice, and it makes people less musical, not more. It makes the culture less musical. When students are focused on speed, you're not thinking about expression. And that's why I'm talking about this. This channel isn't exclusively devoted to whole beat at all. This channel is devoted to all of the things that keep music lessons from working and how you can turn that around to become more skilled at musical expression, starting with taking the courses on my website, which I will link in the description. Single beat metronome readings are a factor in that, so that's why I'm talking about it. So without further ado, let's look at the Single Beater Bingo card, and I'll give you my take on these ubiquitous and unconvincing single beat arguments. I'm not going to get too deep here. If you want the scholarly support for whole beat, Wim Winters at the Authentic Sound channel does an amazing job tirelessly working to provide that. So let's get started. 1. Beethoven's metronome was broken. It wasn't. For one thing, the problem of single beat speeds wasn't unique to Beethoven. It's found in music from all the composers from this time. And the metronome just gives beats per minute. The minute was the accepted measure of time even back then. So if metronomes were this wildly inaccurate, they would know, unless they were an idiot. And Beethoven was not an idiot. 2. Whole beat is the flat earth of music. This isn't an argument. It's just an attempt to delegitimize the discussion. And I can easily counter that by saying single beaters are the geocentrists of music, unwilling to look at the obvious ways the accepted model doesn't work. Even so, you will see this argument pop up anytime whole beat is discussed. 3. Chopin played scales like glissandi. Chopin is another composer who wrote music that's too fast to play in single beat. So apparently there are reports that Chopin could play really fast. So fast his scales sounded like glissandi. But we're not just talking about scales. We're talking about complex figurations, octaves, arpeggios, you name it. Chopin is known to have been a somewhat frail person, and the athletics required to even approach single beat tempos simply isn't in his character. Fast scales can be played delicately, but there's nothing delicate about single beat. 4. Czerny played really fast. Czerny is another composer from that era who's known to have played fast. But not that fast. The problem is the entire culture has sped up in the last 200 years, and music is no exception. The speed of music we call fast today was simply not in the conception of 19th century composers. Think Stagecoach to Space Shuttle. Single beat attempts at some of Czerny's work are ludicrous speed, and he wrote pieces that were supposed to be playable by first-year piano students. It's absolutely impossible that music was intended to be played at single beat by a beginner. Yes, Czerny played fast, but in the context of his time, not yours. 5. Whole beat is a cult. This is just another non-argument, an attempt to demonize people who are just working to solve a problem. If this is a cult, our leader is Wim Winters at Authentic Sound, and he's done an incredible amount of work and scholarship on this. And as far as I can tell, he's only doing it because he cares about music and musicians. Single beat hurts people and produces lousy music as people try to do the impossible. To me, it's a problem that should be addressed, and it's not a good look for musicians to respond with this kind of dehumanizing rhetoric. 6. Whole beat is for people with no dexterity who can't play fast. This is just silly. It's a response from people who haven't developed an ear to listen for anything in music other than athletic velocity. Speed shaming is a great way to keep churning out classical performances that are fast but devoid of emotion or expression. There's no place for it in this discussion. Listen, I got my degrees playing single beat performances. There's even a single beat performance by me in the clickbait video. Whole beat isn't slow. Whole beat is musical. 7. Old pianos played faster. It's pretty common to think that pianos from this era had a lighter action and could therefore be played faster, making single beat tempos possible. Turns out that's not the case. Actions might have been marginally lighter, but they lacked other tech in modern instruments that make the modern instruments ultimately capable of faster speeds. Anyway, there's no shortage of modern musicians playing on historical instruments. If single beat was really the composer's intention, the internet would be full of single beat performances on old instruments. But that's not the case. Single beat was just as impossible on old instruments. 8. Performance timings. Single beaters point to concert durations recorded from the 19th century as evidence that performers must have been using single beat or the concert would have lasted much, much longer. The problem is, this still doesn't solve the issue of impossible playing speeds. And we don't know if perhaps there were cuts made to longer pieces, or maybe repeats weren't taken. 9. But triple meter. Whole beat deniers say whole beat forces performers to force 3 beats against 2. But it doesn't. Students weren't using their metronomes then the way we do now. They weren't practicing with it. They were using it to set the tempo before playing, and then they turned it off. So they weren't practicing with 3 against 2. And it's actually very simple to get triple meter microbeats from the metronome's duple meter macrobeats, like this. You'll have to imagine a ticking metronome because all I have is this electronic one. But imagine a metronome is ticking 1 and 2 and 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. Any musician who's a musician can do that. 10. Martha Argerich can play in single beat. Well, no kidding. Martha Argerich is incredible, but there are some pieces even she can't play in single beat. The thing is, it's kind of absurd to think that classical and romantic era composers were writing only for the best of the best of the best performers from 200 years in the future. Like, if your argument is that it's not impossible because Argerich or Katsaris can do it, you haven't really proved that point. 11. Nothing is impossible with enough rubato. The current approach performers take to single beat is to slow down for the hard parts. Try to make it sound musical and maybe no one will notice. But Chopin explicitly talked about keeping strict time with the left hand. 12. Metronome marks are only for the first 2 bars anyway. The original instructions for the metronome included some language about using the metronome with the first 2 bars of a piece of music, just to set a workable tempo. But that didn't mean you were expected to slow down after that. 13. Tempo marks are only aspirational. This is wild. Single beaters think composers used metronome marks knowing full well that performers couldn't reach them. Like this was the composer's way of notating the struggle they wanted. It's just silly though. Every other single piece of information in a notated score is intended to be taken literally. Like if a composer wants you to play an A flat, they write an A flat. You don't see them notating a Q flat just because they want you to be confused. Nuh-uh. Metronome marks are literal and intended to be taken seriously. 14. Whole beat has been thoroughly debunked. It hasn't. And 24 weak arguments isn't a substitute for one compelling one. We're talking about music, and solutions have to be musical. The real compelling argument would be musical single beat performances of some of the impossible repertoire. Chopin etudes, the Hammerklavier, Czerny and Liszt etudes. In this day and age, with the level of technical pianists we have, there should be hundreds of single beat performances on the internet. That is, if single beat was practical and possible. The fact that for many pieces there are no such performances is telling. 15. Whole beat is for failed pianists. Single beat is for wishful thinkers. Next. 16. Uncritically cite old text sources with a single beat bias. One early set of instructions for the metronome said each single beat or tick forms a part of the intended time. Whole beat deniers say this means they're right. Each single tick, right? I say it means they're wrong. Each tick is only a part of the intended time. Specifically, it's a microbeat, half of a big beat. The thing is, if you're looking at primary sources with a preconceived idea of truth that's only informed by what you've heard in the modern era, you're going to bend over backwards to interpret those texts as if they support you. That's not good scholarship. 17. Keep calling it half tempo. Whole beat isn't half tempo. It's the tempo. Single beat, on the other hand, is double speed. Once you're used to listening to whole beat, single beat sounds like music on fast forward. 18. But these pieces were written for expert performers. Okay, so just how expert does somebody have to be? Who were Chopin etudes written for? The top 10% of pianists or the top 1%? Because single beat speeds are for the top 0.0000001%. And even then, some of them are still impossible. It just doesn't make logical sense to me that composers were publishing works to sell that no one could play, even after 200 years. 19. Slow pieces are too slow in whole beat. To me, it comes down to this question. What's more likely, that composers intended music that's improbably slow to your 21st century ears, or that they intended music that's impossibly fast? I think it's infinitely more likely that music was just slower then. That's a you problem, not a metronome problem. 20. Tempo is a choice. Metronome markings weren't meant to be taken seriously. Yeah, performance tempo is a choice, and it's been recorded that performers were playing faster than composers wanted all the way back to the 19th century. But that's just more proof for whole beat, because it's impossible to play faster than speeds that were impossible to begin with. 21. Etudes are supposed to develop technique. They're too easy in whole beat. Well, that's like saying a 200-pound weight is supposed to give you muscles. That's not how it works. 22. Whole beat is an Alex Jones level conspiracy theory. This is just another dehumanizing argument that does nothing to solve the problem. 23. So people all of a sudden started playing twice as fast? There's no written record of that. Well, there wouldn't be. Performers were playing fast all along. Composers just gradually started to notate tempo accordingly. The modern single beat interpretation isn't great though. There's something to be said for helping performers hear microbeats layered with macrobeats, which is a natural part of whole beat metronome practice. Finally, number 24, articulation and nuance. We ain't got time for that. Because single beaters don't know what they're arguing for. Music that's hell-bent on chasing impossible tempos loses everything composers really did intend. With every bump up the metronome rod, performers lose something. An accent, an articulation, dynamic subtlety. The more speed is valued, the more nuance is lost. And these composers usually took great care to notate subtlety. And that's just not compatible with single beat tempi. Thank you for playing Single Beater Bingo. Congratulations, you still can't play simple Czerny etudes in single beat. I just want to post a short clip of Wim Winters playing Czerny Opus 299 number 1 in whole beat. I don't think he'll mind. It makes perfect musical sense. It's of its time. It's appropriate for beginners in the first years of lessons. Now imagine playing it twice that fast. First of all, it's impossible. Second of all, it makes no sense. But then people will say, fine, but Chopin is supposed to be harder than Czerny. Well, yeah, but the difficulty is in the figuration, the passage work, the harmonic complexity, not in the impossible speed. My message to single beaters is this. Please move on to better arguments. Show us why it's not ludicrous to think that single beat is the answer. Show us with music, not words. At the very least, it's time to come up with new talking points and to stop demonizing those of us who think there might just be something to this whole beat idea. Not giving the idea a fair shake doesn't make one single second of better music in the world. It just makes you look like an a-hole. This music does not need you to protect it. It speaks for itself. At least it does in whole beat, where you have time to actually listen to it.